I want to start by asking a question. Have you ever done the wrong thing at the wrong time? Has anybody ever done that before? A couple years ago, before the world shut down, I went to a movie. I was with my buddy Justin, and we were watching a movie that was at the time the new Mission Impossible movie. And it was like, you know, the pinnacle of a Tom Cruise movie where he's sprinting, because he sprints in every movie? That's what was happening. And about 3 rows in front of me, guy's phone rings. And I'm like, surely he's not going to, oh, he's picking it up. And this is what he said. No, I'm not busy, man. What's up? I'm like, you are busy. You're watching Tom Cruise sprint. Nothing should distract you from this moment. He did the wrong thing at the wrong time. Anybody ever sped down the highway past a police officer? Wrong thing, speeding, wrong time, in front of a cop. When the very first time I met my wife's parents, my future in-laws, it was one of those wrong thing at the wrong time moment that made me realize I belong in this family. And so you got to picture the scene. I've just met them, really, and Kim's one of 7, and the older 3 had grown and off to college and graduated, and Kim was in the middle, and the younger 3 were still home. And so we're sitting around this big dinner table, and Judy, my future mother-in-law, prepared a great spread, delicious food, and it's only a mother can do, or a mother-in-law. She talked the whole meal through clenched teeth. Stop it. Be quiet. Is everything good? Behave. Only a mother can do that. Mothers have a gift of speaking through clenched teeth. So I was enjoying the show, enjoying the moment. It was kind of chaotic. And I looked down at my future father-in-law, and he's got a spoon of potatoes on his, just a hunk of potatoes on his spoon. And then he grabbed this end of the spoon, and he bent it down, and he flung it. And the potatoes were stuck to the ceiling, and then back down. And I was like, I love this family. I am marrying this into this. This is going to be awesome. And Judy's face was like, wrong thing to do, Rick, at the wrong time. It was awesome for me. Have you ever said the wrong thing? Oh, it's good to see you. When do you do? Doing your taxes. When do you do? Because if you ask a lady when they're due, and they're not, it's the wrong thing at the wrong time. Or how about the dreaded, if your wife says, do these pants make me look fat? And you say, yeah, actually they do. Wrong thing to say at the wrong time, right? We've done these things, hopefully never those latter 2, but we've done things, it's just the wrong time, the wrong thing. You've said it. I was flying a couple weeks ago, and I scanned my phone for the pass, and she said, have a nice flight. And I was like, you too. Oh, why did I say that? Like, she's not flying anywhere right now. She's busy at her job. I was an idiot. We've all had those moments, right? And in Luke chapter 11, there is a wrong thing at the wrong time moment. If you have your Bibles, I would love if you would flip open to Luke chapter 11. Because what's happening in our text today is Jesus, and I've shared this many, many times, is Jesus is gaining and growing in popularity. His influence is growing by leaps and bounds. And so as his attendants, right, his followers are going up and to the right, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, their followers are now going down and to the right. So Jesus is increasing in followers, increasing in influence. The Pharisees, the religious leaders, the pastors of the day, they see their followers, they see their influence, they see their people leaving them and going to Jesus. And it's really chapping them off. They are upset about this. And so you can go all the way back to the very first miracle of Jesus turning water into wine, where you could just sense that the Pharisees are done with Jesus already. And he hasn't even really started. And so at this point in Luke chapter 11, thousands of people every day are following him. What's he going to teach me? What's he going to show me? How am I going to learn something? And it says in Luke chapter 11, when it says, when Jesus had finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him. And so he went and reclined at the table. So picture, Jesus has been teaching thousands and thousands of people. The Pharisee says, hey, JC, you want to come over for dinner? Cool, let's go. And so Jesus comes over for dinner. And it says he immediately reclined at the table. And you're like, well, what's the big deal? What's the problem? Well, you have to understand something. They ate differently than we eat. We eat at a table. We sit down and we eat. They would literally come in, begin to wash their hands, Then they would recline. They would put their head down. Depending on the affluence of the host would be the depth of the cushion. So if you only had a thin cushion, you didn't really have a lot of influence, money, affluence. But you had a thicker cushion, it means you had prominence and power. And so Jesus literally jumps in at the meal. You're like, well, Dan, what's the big deal about this? Thousands of people are watching, listening, learning from Jesus. Pharisee invites him over. And in this courtyard, again, they don't have houses like we have them. There would have been long, long tables, even probably the size of this platform, in a big square. And on the inside would have been servants and maids and people helping pass out food. And there'd be deep conversation while hundreds of people gathered around and listened. And so Jesus bypasses the ceremonial hand cleansing, and it says he jumps right into the meal. They would have shared cups, the cauldron, they would have shared it. For all you germaphobes, you're creeping out right now, like that's disgusting. Jesus would have broken a piece of bread off, passed it with the dirty hands to the person beside him. And so Jesus bypasses what was customary. And it says the Pharisee was surprised when he noticed that Jesus did not first wash his hands before the meal. Now again, for all you germaphobes, before you lose trust and hope in Jesus, this was not about Purell. This was about purity. You see, the Pharisees and the religious leaders believed that in order to approach God, you had to be clean on the outside. That God would not accept you if you were dirty on the outside. And so literally what Jesus should have done was this. He should have walked in. He should have removed his outer garment. And he should have done this. Once. Twice. Once. Twice. And then he would switch hands. And he would clean this hand once. Twice. Once. Twice. And the whole time he's doing that, then he would grab a towel and he would dry off. He's reciting a prayer. Baruch atah Adonai. Eloheinu melech halom. Baruch atah Adonai. Malik Allah halom. Baruch atah Adonai. The whole time he's reciting a prayer. Now you're like, what does that even mean? It means this. It means, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us. And you've commanded us the concern of washing our hands. Every time they ate a meal, they had to repeat that process. In fact, as I was reading about the culture of the Jewish tradition, I came across an article that was fascinating. And here was a quote from a Jewish scholar. He said, eating bread without first performing this ceremonial washing, it was equal to having sex with a prostitute. That if Jesus didn't come in and do exactly what they wanted him to, as he was supposed to, he was defiling himself so much that it was equivalent to having sex with a prostitute. And so now you got to picture this. I've tried to paint the scene for you. You have hundreds of people that have been following Jesus, have followed him to the meal. They weren't invited in to eat, but they would stand around the courtyard. So now you've got the Pharisees, the religious leaders going, how dare he break tradition, especially in front of all of our followers? One other person said this way, by not ceremonial cleansing his hands, Jesus was performing such a contemptuous act as to be uprooted from the world. You're like, Dan, you're going a little crazy on this thing. Yeah, we have to understand the content and the context of what Jesus skipped. Jesus walks in. He's like, oh, nice, the new peach habanero salsa. This is great. And jumps right in. And he skips the most important part of the meal according to the Pharisees. And so Jesus doesn't wash his hands. And internally, the Pharisees are judging him. They're condemning him. And so Jesus does his Jesus thing. Now, I want to come from the flip side for a second, because the Pharisees actually are trying. The Pharisees get a bad rap. But for the most part, the Pharisees were trying to follow the rules, to follow the law, to follow the 613 commandments that they had to memorize and obey. Imagine trying to memorize 613 laws and obeying them every day. That would drive me crazy. They're trying to memorize Scripture, memorize the Torah. They're trying. And I just wonder how many of us are Pharisees? Oh, we're trying our best. We're trying to learn and teach and obey and memorize, but we're missing, we think we're doing the right thing, but we're missing the most important thing, which is Jesus. The relationship that we can have with him. See, I grew up, many of you know this, my dad was a pastor. And so I grew up in the church. Sunday morning, we went to church. Sunday night, we went to church. Wednesday evening, we went to church for Bible study. Friday night, we went to church for youth group. I grew up in the church, always at the church. And I was a senior in high school, and I decided I'm going to make this Jesus thing mine. Not my parents. I'm going to make it mine. And so I really committed my life to Jesus when I was a senior in high school. I tried my own thing, didn't work. Tried what the world had offered, it didn't work. I surrendered my life to Jesus. And I remember one Sunday morning, I had worked up the courage to invite my best friend, Trevor, to church. Throughout the week, I'm like, I'm going to invite Trevor. And I invited him. I said, Trev, would you want to come to church with me some Sunday? I'll spend the night at your house Friday night. We'll play Sega Genesis because that's how old I am. And we'll hang out. And then on Saturday night, and then we'll get up and we'll go to church together. It's at 11 o'clock. And Trev's like, yeah, I'd love to go with you. I'm like, oh, I expected you to say no because that's our fear, right? Rejection. If I ask somebody and they say no, then I'm embarrassed. Listen, all you have to do is ask. Leave the results to Jesus, right? And so Trevor, we're walking up. And it was an old school Wesleyan church. We walked up and we opened the door. We walked in the back of the door was a little lobby area with coat racks on both sides. You can picture this if you grew up in the old school Wesleyan churches. And we walked in, and I can't call him a greeter because he wasn't greeting, he was a grumper. He was grumpy. And I can remember it clearly. He looked me up and down. And then he turned to my friend Trevor and said, take your hat off. You're in God's house. You know who never went back to church with me? Trevor. Because there was rules and customs and traditions that he didn't give a rip about. And when that grumper made his preference Trevor's priority, Trevor said, I'm out. I have enough rules at home. I have enough rules at school. I have enough rules at work. I have enough rules with my sports team and my coach. I don't need another place where I'm not good enough to fit in. And Trevor never went back to church with me. And I wonder if there's some people here this morning, and don't think, oh, wow, how are they doing? I wish they heard this. Insert your name here. I wonder if Dan sometimes is more focused on someone coming in and wearing a hat than I am with the plank in my own eye. I wonder if some of us are more concerned with what they do and what they say and what they drink and what they eat and what they wear and what they watch than we are with the plank in our own eye. And the whole point of this dinner with Jesus is to have an open mind and to place ourselves in the seat of the Pharisee and say, is there anything, Jesus, that I'm missing? Is there a moment in my life, Jesus, where I'm like, I'm being a Pharisee right now, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that. Listen, I'm not perfect. I never have claimed to be. My wife and kids will say, yeah, he ain't perfect, believe me. But I want to be a church and a person that the guy walking in wearing a hat feels welcomed here, not judged and not condemned. I want the person who drank too much to stumble in these doors, reeking of alcohol, going, my life is a mess. Can you help? And I go, yep, I know a guy that can change your life. He changed mine. His name's Jesus. Not get out of here till you're sobered up. Because I don't need you clean on the outside. Jesus will take care of the inside. That's who I serve, because I was a mess before I met Jesus. I want the person who's buried under addiction and feels so much shame and guilt to come through these doors and find hope and healing through Jesus. I want the couples whose marriage is just barely hanging on by a thread to find restoration in their marriage and in their family here at our church. Don't you? Don't you want that for people so that they can experience the hope and the freedom that you've had? Or are you more concerned about the grumper and the person that comes in not looking like you, dressing like you, acting like you, talking like you, thinking like you, voting like you? Dan, put your name there. And so Jesus basically in Luke chapter 11 gives 4 huge warnings to the Pharisees, and I think he's giving them to us too. And so he starts with the dishes. He starts with the dishes. And remember, he's not washed his hands yet. And so he says this to the Pharisees. Now then, you Pharisees, you clean the outside of the cup, but inside you're full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people. Did the one who made the outside not make the inside also? But now as for what is inside of you, be generous to the poor, and everything else will be clean for you. Now, if you read Luke 11, the Pharisees haven't said a word yet. Nothing's been said, and you're like, Jesus, just pump the brakes for a second. You seem upset. And then I remember a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh, I guess this is what it feels like. My wife woke up, and she said, I'm mad at you. I'm like, oh, what did I do? She's like, in my dream last night, you did something. I'm like, but that was your dream. She's like, yeah, but you still did it, so I'm mad at you. I'm like, man, have you ever had an upset wife because of something you did in their dream? Like, I should be upset with you that you would think I would do that in your dream. And I'm like, I read that and I go, Jesus, they really haven't said anything yet. You're kind of going hard at them. And he says, yeah, this whole ceremonial cleansing thing, it's not important. You do it for show. You're doing this for show to be recognized. Because inside the cup, your outside looks really good. It's clean, it's shiny, it's perfect, but inside it's dried on, caked on filth. Parents, have you ever let your kids do the dishes and then you have to do the dishes? I harp on my kids. We love oatmeal in our house. I just think it's a great meal. And then when they put the bowl of oatmeal in the dishwasher and it sits there for a day or two before it runs, you could grout with dried on, caked on oatmeal. You could pave the driveway. That is the worst thing. I'm like, soak the dang dishes, please, for the love of all things pure and holy, because we're out there scraping it. And what Jesus is saying is, you're like oatmeal, Pharisees. You're outside, the kids cleaned it really good, and inside it's just filth. Is there anybody here that can relate to that? Don't raise your hand. You look good on the outside. You're all dialed in for church. But inside, it is dried on, caked on filth. And so he goes at them. And again, they haven't said anything. And he started with the dishes. And then he moves to the herbs and the spices and the giving. And he says, guys, woe to you. And that means destruction. Woe to you means literally destruction to you, Pharisees. It's coming for you, destruction. You give a tenth of your mint and your rue and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect love and justice. You neglect the justice and love of God. And you should have practiced the latter, love and justice, and still done the first thing, giving your tithes, giving your tenths, giving your mint, your rue, and other herbs. He says, you're doing the right things. You're just doing them for the wrong reasons. Think of it this way. I've been married for almost 20 years. And so I can tell my wife, honey, I love you. But if I don't treat her right, and I don't date her, and I don't honor her, and I don't keep myself only for her, and I don't encourage her and support her and help her up when she's down and build her up, do I love her? No. I say I do, but I don't. And what Jesus is saying is, you're saying the right things, but you're neglecting love and justice. That's at the heart of Jesus. Love and justice is at the heart of Jesus. And you're like, well, what is love and justice? Well, justice means to make right. So to have love and justice as a Jesus follower, it means your hurt becomes my hurt. And your burden becomes my burden. And your pain becomes mine, and I'll walk alongside of you. I won't do this. I'm just going to heap it on you, buddy. I know you're struggling right now, and I don't care. You're not following the rules. Love and justice says, I'm going to come alongside, and I'm going to put my arm around. A few years ago, I've shared this before. A few years ago, Kim and I had a season just where we had church hurts. We all had them, and we did a series on that back in January. And we watched so many people in the church step away from us, and only a handful step towards us. And so Kim and I made this vow, this pact, that we will step towards people who are lost, who are least, and overlooked. I will step towards people who are lost, who are the least, and who are overlooked. Because Jesus did that for me. Lost, least, and overlooked. Has anybody else's problem become your problems, or you just talk about them? Have their hurts become your hurts, and their struggles become your struggles? Have you stepped towards people who don't look like you, and dress like you, and vote like you, and act like you? Or another way to say it is, are you okay to let the person walk into church wearing a hat and not feel the need to tell them to take it off? Love and justice is at the heart of Jesus. So he starts with the dishes, he moves to the herbs and spices, and then he goes to the seats. And now he starts to step on some toes, because these Pharisees have worked really hard to get those seats. And he says to you, woe to you, destruction to you, because you love the most important seats in the synagogues, and you love the respectful greetings in the marketplace. You love to be recognized. You love to be noticed. I told you I grew up going to church, which meant I grew up going to church camp every summer. Anybody ever go to the Tabernacle at family camp, right? Like we went to these church camps. And I'm going to guess this church had these seats, because I grew up, with seats on the stage. And there was always 2 or 3 people sitting in those seats while the preacher preached, looking out. And I thought, man, those people must be important. How do I get those seats? And then I realized, man, they got to stare at the preacher's backside the whole service. I don't want to look at the preacher's butt for 30 minutes. So I'll take my seat out there, and you can sit up in your comfy throne, and you can judge me all you want. Because that's how I felt as a teenager. Well, why they got those seats was because they were district superintendents or general superintendents or some sort of regional honcho. And as a teenager, I felt judged by them. Why can't you just sit down here with me? Why do you have to sit up there and stare at me like I'm the sinner and you're the saint? And what Jesus is saying is, you guys love, you Pharisees, woe to you, you love these seats of importance. Because the synagogue was kind of like, ever gone on to Ticketmaster for a concert and you're like, general seating's fine, I'll find a spot. That was the synagogue. You come in and you would come to the front, and at the front would have been the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. The Torah would have sat there, and all the religious leaders of the highfalutin ones would have clamored for the seats that sat around the Torah. Good church attendance, good giving, good prayers, helping people. They didn't do it for Jesus and for God. They did it for these seats. And what he's saying is, you love those seats and you love the greetings, but you're missing the heart of me. And you're like, Dan, I've never done that before. I've never wanted to sit on the big throne on the stage. Me neither, because again, I don't want to stare at the preacher's backside. I don't want you staring at my backside for 30 minutes, okay? But think about this, self-evaluate. Have you ever clamored for a position of influence or leadership? Think about when you walk out of the cafeteria at college or high school, you walked out with your tray of food and you looked, where can I sit that I don't have to sit with the losers? Where do I sit that I'll be noticed and recognized? Can I sit near the cool kids so they'll see me? We're clamoring for position. When we walk into church, do you walk up to somebody you've never met before, or do you look for the people you feel safe and comfortable with? Sometimes I think, what can I wear that'll make me look good? What can I wear that'll make me look cool? That's a position that I'm clamoring for. What can I post that's going to, make waves? Or what can I post that's controversy? What can I post to stir the pot? You're clamoring for position. When you engage in conversations and you tell jokes and stories that are probably not true most of the time to elevate yourself, we're doing that. We're just doing it modern day. And Jesus says, I just want to come into your heart so I can clean out the dried on, caked on filth. Let me in here and I will clean you out. And then he comes to the final woe. He comes to the fourth woe. And he comes to these what are called whitewashed tombs. Now you have to understand what a whitewashed tomb was. He says, woe to you because you are like unmarked graves, which people walk over without knowing it. Now, in this culture, if you came in contact with a tomb, you had to perform a ritual to get back to God. And so I'm going to say a word that's a trigger word: isolation. You had to spend 7 days in isolation if you came across a tomb, a dead body, a carcass. And so what they would do was they would whitewash the tomb, so I know I never want to go near that because I don't want to lose my seat around the Torah in the synagogue. I don't want to lose my prominence, my affluence. I don't want to lose my position. So I'm going to do everything I can to avoid this. And so if you came in contact with a grave, or sometimes if you thought you came in contact with a grave, you literally had to perform this ceremonial cleansing. And Jesus says, woe to you, because you guys are like unmarked graves. And people are now walking on them, and you're making them do things that mean nothing. You're putting your preference and making it priority, because I came to abolish that stuff. And what he's doing here is he's helping them understand, because in this culture, if you touched an unmarked grave or a tomb, you had to separate yourself for 7 days. You had to go buy a cow, a certain breed of cow. You had to cut the cow open a certain way. You had to cut it a certain way and prepare it a certain way. You had to offer it on the sacrifice, on the altar as a sacrifice a certain way. And when it had burned down, you had to pick up the ashes and you had to sprinkle them over your head. All a certain way. And if you did it wrong, you had to repeat it. If you didn't burn it right, if you didn't sprinkle it right, if you didn't sacrifice it right, if you cut short your 7 days. And so they do everything they can to avoid this ceremonial cleansing because they don't want to have to do it. And what he's saying is, listen, you guys are the ones defiling people. You've been given so much authority and so much leadership and so much influence to do good. But they've worn a hat to church, and the only thing you can say is, take it off. You're in God's house. You've been given opportunities to welcome the new kid that's never been here before, and your only words are, take it off. You're in God's house. And he says, you've placed your preferences and you've made them my priority, and I'm here for the lost, the least, and the overlooked. When people are sad, you're distant. When they need help, you walk away. When they can't figure out what way is up, you turn your back and you heap more judgment and condemnation on them. Shame on you, Dan, when I've done that. Because I've done that. Again, I'm not thinking, man, I hope so-and-so hears this. I'm thinking, man, I hope Dan really pays attention this morning. I believe there are people with the title of Christian, but they're so empty and void of the heart of Jesus. I'm going to give you a real-life example of this. Westboro Baptist Church. They wear the title Christian. They are so empty, so void of the heart of Jesus. I'm just going to say this. You will never bully somebody into the kingdom of heaven. Ever. You'll never stand with your picket sign, God hates fags. Oh, he does. I better change. I've never met somebody that's voted opposite party because of your yard sign. Driving down, oh, Biden 2020. You know what? I am switching over because of that yard sign. Yep. Trump 2024. You know what? Maybe he isn't a loose cannon now. Maybe I should vote. No one has ever changed how they vote off of your yard sign. They don't. You'll never bully somebody. I'll never bully somebody into the kingdom of heaven. I can lead people to hell if I'm not careful. I can show people the way to hell that's opposite of the love and the heart and the justice of Jesus. You'll never gossip somebody into heaven. You'll never shame them into heaven. You'll never bully somebody into heaven. I never want to wear the badge, the title of Christian, without representing Jesus well. Am I perfect? Nope, I didn't say perfectly. I said well. I'm an ambassador of Jesus. And if you claim to be a follower of Jesus, you are an ambassador, which means you represent him. By the things you say, do, watch, participate in, talk about. You represent, every day I represent Jesus. Because I claim to be a follower of Jesus. So I'm an ambassador of Jesus. And if you say you love Jesus and follow Jesus, then you are an ambassador of him. How well are you representing him? We are his spokespeople, his press secretary, so to speak. We represent him if we claim him. So what I find interesting, and I'm going to wrap up here in a second, I find interesting is a lot of us, and myself included, have worked so hard on our image and being good and doing right and all of those things. We've worked so hard at this that we forget that he's made this part too. You are created in the image of God. Outside and inside. But because some of us have worn masks for so long, the image that you have of yourself has become the image that you think Jesus thinks of you. Well, I'm a failure. Jesus must think I'm a failure. I've screwed up. Jesus must think I'm a screw up. I've dropped the ball. I've fallen short. Jesus must think I'm always going to drop the ball and I'm always going to fall short. And Jesus is saying, no. I don't need you. I don't need you to perform rituals. I just want your heart. Let me in so I can take that dried on, caked on, nasty filth off, because you'll never do it on your own, Dan. I will tell you, I tried for years to clean the inside on my own. Years. If I just do enough right, then Jesus will. And you're going to hear that on Easter Sunday. You're going to hear my story on Easter Sunday morning and how God rescued me and redeemed me and restored me. So how I want to close is I want you to think under your mask, under your image, might be a person that's struggling with identity. Who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? I'm not accomplishing anything. I'm not doing anything. I'm worthless. And underneath your mask, I dressed up for church today, and I put my tithe check in today, and I was here today, and I parked far away so I could save the best for the guests today. Underneath, you're hurting, broken, and empty. And Jesus is saying, let me in. Let me in. So I'm not going to close with an altar call. I'm not going to close any other way than this. Maybe this is your week to get right with God. Maybe this is your week where you say, I have done this, and I didn't even know I was doing this. I have put my preferences and made it their priorities, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. I need to apologize to that person. So that when the person who walks in on Easter Sunday morning wearing a hat, our first reaction isn't take your hat off, you're in God's house. It's, man, I'm glad you're here. You're in the right place. Because my Jesus came for the lost, the least, and the overlooked. That's who I was. I'm going to guess that's who many of you were at one point too. Unless you're perfect. It was a facetious joke, people. You can laugh. Because none of us are. At one point, all of us were lost, least, or overlooked. And Jesus came in and cleaned you out. So next week, between now and then, might be your week to get right with God. It might be your week to invite somebody to Easter Sunday morning. We have invite cards, postcards, where you say, you know what, I'd love to invite you to my church. I don't want you to invite you to hear the pastor. I want you to invite to hear Jesus and what he's done for me and what he can do for you. I want to invite you to hear the hope that Jesus can offer, because I know you're hurting this week. And I think he can offer you something that nobody else can. And you just slip him this card. Or you're driving through the drive-thru and you put that with your credit card. You say, hey, this is for you. Just love for you to come to church with me Sunday morning. But make sure you're right with Jesus as an ambassador who represents him. Let him in here this week to clean out, to get rid of the dried on, caked on filth. Father, I thank you for this message that's probably been for me and only me, because I needed it this week, just to be reminded of your goodness. God, I pray that as a church, we wouldn't put our preferences and make them priorities on people. That we would hear from you, that we would be ambassadors, we would represent you well. I thank you, God, for Luke chapter 11, where you set the stage of, here's why I'm here. My heart is for the lost. My heart is for the least. My heart is for the overlooked. May that become our heart, love and justice, to step towards, to come alongside. And help us to remember that we'll never bully somebody into your kingdom. And so we give you praise and thanks for what you're doing here. And I pray that you be honored this week as we give you our cups, we give you our lives, and let you in. In your name we pray. Amen and amen. See you next week, church.